There is a terror more profound than any ghost or monster. It is the terror of the person in the mirror becoming a stranger. This is not a story about hauntings. It is a story about erasure. And if you listen closely, you will hear the moment a soul goes silent. She was just a woman who lived in a house with beige walls and a maple tree in the front yard that turned a brilliant, fiery red every October. For 20 years, she made coffee in the same chipped blue mug. For 20 years, she packed lunches, signed permission slips, and folded socks. She was the architect of a small, quiet world. A world that, one day, decided it no longer needed its architect. It didn't happen with a bang. There was no single, dramatic betrayal. It was a slow, quiet suffocation. It was in the way her husband's eyes would slide over her at the dinner table, as if she were another piece of furniture. It was in the way her teenagers' conversations were a foreign language of slang and inside jokes, spoken in a room she was no longer permitted to enter. Her opinions became background noise. Her needs became inconveniences. Her love became a given, a constant, like the hum of the refrigerator, something you only notice when it suddenly stops. She began to feel a peculiar hollowness, a silence in the center of herself. At first, it was just a quiet space she visited in her mind when the noise of her family became too much. But the silence had a gravity all its own. It began to pull at her. She would find herself standing in the grocery aisle, staring at a can of soup, and for a terrifying moment, she couldn't remember why she was there. Or she'd be driving her son to soccer practice and a thought would slip, unbidden, into her mind. I could just keep driving. I could just not stop. It wasn't a desire to escape her family. It was a deeper, more primal urge. The urge to see if the road still led somewhere, anywhere, that felt real. Her body began to feel like a rented room, a place she was temporarily inhabiting, filled with someone else's belongings. She'd look at her hands on the steering wheel and think, whose hands are these? They were capable hands, strong from carrying groceries and babies and the weight of 1,000 minor disappointments. But they felt disconnected. Alien, the face in the mirror. That was the greatest mystery of all. It was her face. Yes, the same green eyes, the same small scar above the brow from a childhood fall. But the person looking out from behind those eyes, she was a ghost, a fading photograph. And then, the whispers started. Not audible voices. These were subtler, more insidious. They were the echoes of choices not made. The ghost of the woman she might have been. The artist who put down her brushes. The traveler who canceled her ticket. The lover who chose security over passion. These ghosts didn't scream. They simply stood in the corners of her life, in the quiet of the empty house at 3 p.m., and they looked at her with a profound, unanswerable pity. The world called it a crisis, a midlife crisis, a hormonal shift. It labeled her feelings, packaged them in clinical terms, and prescribed pills and platitudes. But this was not a crisis. A crisis is a sudden, sharp event. This was a thaw. For 40 years, she had been frozen, a perfect, still statue of mother, wife, provider. The needs of others were the cult that kept her preserved. But now, a slow, inexorable warmth was seeping in. The ice was cracking, and what was emerging from the meltwater was not the woman she had been, but something raw and new and terrifyingly alive. She started making small, inexplicable changes. She bought a lipstick the color of a crushed ruby, a color she would have never dared to wear before. She started locking the bathroom door when she showered, not for privacy, but to feel the simple, sovereign power of a locked door. She began taking long walks alone at dusk, not for exercise, but to feel the twilight air on her skin and remember that her body belonged to the world, not just to a household. Her family noticed. Of course, they didn't see a woman rediscovering herself. They saw a machine malfunctioning. Her husband would joke, "Who are you and what have you done with my wife?" It was meant to be light, but the question had a sharp, serrated edge. Who are you? She was starting to wonder the same thing, and the answer was becoming less and less clear. The hunger began then, a physical, aching hunger in the pit of her stomach. It wasn't for food, it was for texture, for sensation, for proof that her nerve endings still worked. She would run her hands over the rough bark of the maple tree in the yard, pressing until her skin was raw. She started drinking her coffee black, savoring the bitter burn on her tongue. She needed to feel something, anything, that was sharp and real and undeniable. The soft, padded life she had built had become a sensory deprivation chamber. She found herself drawn to stories of wildfires, how a forest, choked with undergrowth, can be sparked by a single lightning strike and burn for weeks, cleansing the earth, making way for new growth. She started to wonder if a soul could work the same way. If the accumulated debris of a lifetime, the compromises, the silences, the swallowed words, could become so dense that only a fire could clear it away. The first real fissure appeared on Tuesday. It was a nothing day, a day of gray skies and leftover meatloaf. Her daughter was complaining about a teacher. Her son was scrolling on his phone. Her husband was talking about a quarterly report. The sound of their lives was a monotonous hum, and in the middle of it, she was setting the table, and she looked at the knife in her hand. A simple, ordinary kitchen knife. And a thought, clear and cold as ice, formed in her mind. I could plunge this into the polished wood of this table. I could shatter this perfect, boring surface. She didn't, of course. She laid the knife gently beside the plate. But the thought had been there. It had been real, and it had felt good. It felt like power. The power to disrupt. The power to make a mark. However violent, however destructive. It was a sign that she still could. This is the part they never talk about. The seduction of the breaking point. It's not a place of fear. It's a place of immense, terrifying clarity. It's the edge of a cliff, and the wind is roaring in your ears, and for the first time in years, you are making a choice to step back or to fly. She began to collect these small acts of rebellion like secret treasures. She stopped wearing her wedding ring to bed. She started a journal, not to record her days, but to write down all the things she had never said. The pages filled with a quiet, controlled fury. I hate the sound of your chewing. I am bored by your stories. I dreamed of a different life, and I settled for this one. I feel so lonely in this house I built with my own hands. One night, her husband reached for her in the dark. His touch was familiar, routine. For 20 years, her body had responded on autopilot. But that night, it didn't. It was like a key turning in a lock that had been changed. She felt a revulsion so physical, so visceral, it made her stomach clench. It wasn't about him. Not really. It was about her body finally, defiantly, stating its own sovereignty. This is mine, it said. You may not enter. She pushed his hand away. The silence in the bedroom was heavier than any sound. He sighed, a sigh of weary resignation, and rolled over. In that sigh, she heard the entire history of their marriage. Her needs were a burden. Her desires were an inconvenience. Her no was a problem to be managed. The ice around her heart, which had been thawing, flash froze into something harder than diamond. The following week, she did something that seemed, to an outsider, completely unremarkable. She booked a hotel room, a nice one, downtown, with a view of the city lights. She told her family she was visiting a sick friend. It was the first significant lie she had ever told them. The act of packing a small bag, of driving away from her street, felt more transgressive than any affair. This was an affair with herself. She spent the night in that sterile, anonymous room. She ordered room service and ate it naked, sitting by the window, watching the lights of the city glitter like a bed of jewels. She didn't read. She didn't watch TV. She just sat. And in that silence, without the roles and responsibilities that usually defined her, she finally met the woman she had become. She was angry. She was grief-stricken. She was powerful. She was terrified. She was a creature of pure, untamed potential. And she knew, with a certainty that shook her to her core, that she could not go back into the cage, even if the cage was made of love, even if it was the only home she had ever known. When she returned the next day, the house felt different, smaller. The air was stale. Her family's voices were tinny and far away. She had crossed a threshold, and there was no returning. She looked at her husband and saw not a partner, but a jailer. She looked at her children and saw not her heart walking outside her body, but living, breathing anchors, chaining her to a life that was slowly killing her. This is the true, unspeakable horror. This is the moment the world labels crazy. It is not a descent into madness. It is an ascent into a painful, brutal sanity. It is the realization that the life you have is a lie, and the only truth left is the scorched earth of your own desires. She began to dismantle her life with a methodical, chilling precision. It wasn't the hysterical, chaotic breakdown they show in movies. It was quiet. It was calm. It was the steady, unstoppable work of a glacier carving a canyon. She hired a lawyer. She started moving her money into a separate account. She spent hours online, looking at apartments in cities she had never visited. She was planning her escape with the cool focus of a general preparing for war. And her family, trapped in their own comfortable blindness, saw nothing. They saw a woman who was maybe a little distant, a little quiet. They didn't see the demolition charges being set against the foundations of their world. The final catalyst was, as it often is, something small, a forgotten anniversary, not theirs, her own. The anniversary of the day she graduated from college, the day she had stood on a stage, her whole life a blank, beautiful page before her. She had kept the tassel from her cap, a silly, sentimental thing tucked in the back of her jewelry box. She went to look for it that morning, needing to hold a piece of that hopeful, unbroken girl, but it was gone. When she asked her husband if he'd seen it, he shrugged. Probably threw it out when we moved, he said, not looking up from his newspaper. It was just a piece of string, just a piece of string. In that moment, something in her finally, irrevocably, snapped. It was not a breakdown, it was a breakthrough. The final, fragile thread connecting her to the woman of that house, to the mother of those children, to the wife of that man, simply dissolved. The love she had felt, the duty, the identity, it all turned to dust in her hands. She didn't scream, she didn't cry. She walked into the living room where her family was gathered, bathed in the innocent morning light. "I'm leaving," she said. Her voice was calm, flat. It was the voice of a stranger. The shock in the room was a physical force. Her daughter started to cry. Her son looked bewildered. Her husband's face cycled through confusion, anger, and finally, a cold, hard contempt. "Why?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "After all I've given you, this house, this life, what more do you want?" She looked at him, and for the first time, she saw the little boy inside the man, terrified of being abandoned. But the sight evoked no pity, only a distant, clinical recognition. "It's not about what you can give me," she said, her words falling like stones. "It's about what you've taken. You took my name and made it wife. You took my body and made it a habitat. You took my dreams and you used them as kindling to keep this hearth warm. There's nothing left of me to burn." She turned and walked out the front door. She didn't take a suitcase. She didn't look back at the maple tree, now bare of its brilliant leaves. She got into her car and drove. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew that she was moving, and that for the first time in 20 years, the direction was her own. Behind her, she left a crater, a family shattered, bewildered, asking the one question that has no answer that can comfort them. Why? They will tell a story of a woman who went crazy, a woman who had everything and threw it away. They will paint her as a monster, a villain, a lesson in instability, but they will never understand the exquisite, soul-shattering pain of being slowly erased by the people you love most. They will never know the sound of your own spirit, screaming for air from the bottom of a well of obligation. They will call it madness, but it is not madness. It is a long, quiet, and brutal awakening. It is the sound of a soul, after 40 years of silence, finally finding its voice. And its first word is a scream that shatters the world. And if you listen to the silence after the breaking, in the quiet of your own home, in the space between your own heartbeats, you might just hear the faint, terrifying sound of your own eyes beginning to crack.